Greetings, viewers. I have an awful lot of pens here today, but interestingly enough, this is really not a pen episode. I'm really not going to be talking about pens too much per se. This is an ink episode. So I'm going to be talking about what I call basic blue inks. These are sort of standard blue inks that in general are not designed to have any sort of special effects to them or anything like that. Some do under certain circumstances, and we'll get to that. But these are designed to be your basic, fairly conservative, run-of-the-mill, standard blue inks. And I actually have quite a few of them, and I probably have quite a few more didn't exactly make the cut, and maybe we'll do those on subsequent episodes. And I also, like I said, I drew the line at inks that have special effects. So, for example, you will not see Organic Studio Nitrogen, or even though this is definitely a blue ink, making an appearance in this video. So I have 10 different inks that I'm going to be talking about today. Wait, is it 10? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 inks, yes. 10 different inks, all in 10 different pens. So it's not exactly a scientific comparison because they're all going to be in some very, very different pens. But hopefully this will give you a sort of flavor for different types of blue inks. So without any further ado, let's get right to it. Okay, the first ink that we have up is Diamine China Blue. This is a very nice ink from Diamine. It's a little on the sort of lighter side of what you might call standard blue inks. So here we go. This is Diamine China Blue. And this pen is a Jinhao 950, and this has a fine what we call Bobby custom nib. So check out the video I did a little while back. This is sort of a replacement nib. This is not the original nib that comes in the Jinhao 950. But refer back a couple of weeks ago, I have an entire video where I talk about this Bobby custom nib. So this is the Diamine China Blue. Okay. Next up is another Diamine ink. This is the only duplicate ink. Diamine is the only manufacturer here that I have multiple inks from. So this is Diamine Mediterranean Blue, also a very, very nice shade of blue. Diamine makes a ton of inks. There's probably maybe 10 inks that Diamine makes that you legitimately could put in this sort of standard blue category. So this is Diamine Mediterranean Blue. Let me make sure I spell Mediterranean correctly. Mediterranean. And this pen is a Mont Blanc Boheme in fine. And this is as you can see, this is a darker ink to begin with, but this Mont Blanc pen is laying down quite a bit more ink than the Jinhao did anyway. So again, like I said, this is not going to be the most scientific comparison, but the Mediterranean Blue definitely is a more saturated, darker blue than the China Blue to begin with. So that is Diamine Mediterranean Blue. The next up is sort of an ink that's fairly well known and been around for a long time. This is Parker Quint Washable Blue. This ink was reformulated over the years. So if you have an old antique bottle of Parker Quint, it definitely had a solvent in it, which I do not believe they use anymore. Quint Washable Blue. And this is a Parker 45 in medium nib. And again, very nice, very standard shade of blue. Next up might be one of the safest blues around. This is one I use for piston filling pens, vintage sack fillers, etc. This is Waterman Serenity blue. It's a great blue to begin with. So this is Waterman Serenity blue. And this pen is a Lamy 2000 in medium. And again, very nice, really saturated blue, but again, a pretty safe blue. Next one's a great blue, Pilot blue. Very standard blue. If this bottle is a little tough to find, this particular bottle, this one actually came with the pen, and came with the pen you're about to see it right in. So this is a Pilot Custom 823, and it came bundled with the bottle of Pilot blue. So this is a Pilot Custom 823, and this is, I'm supposed to be talking about the ink now, aren't I? Pilot blue. And this is a broad nib. Again, really nice ink. In a nice broad nib like this, you get a little bit of shading with that as well. Looks really nice. So the next, we're going to go to a great blue in one of my favorite vintage pens. So this ink is a J. Herbin's basic blue ink. So this is J. Herbin's Éclat de Saphir. So this is J. Herbin Éclat. I'm probably butchering this French pronunciation for sure. There is an accent there. De Saphir. And this pen is a vintage Schaefer PFM, which stood for Pen for Men. You would not dream of naming a product that in these days. But this, again, nice deep ink. A lot of people say this one is a good alternative to Bay State blue. If you want Bay State blue, but you're sort of terrified of the prospect of using it, that this is a good safe version of Bay State blue. Not about to disagree. Bay State blue definitely is more highly saturated, but again, not about to disagree with that at all. Let's flip the page and go to a couple more inks. So the next ink up is from Monteverde, and this is Monteverde Horizon Blue. Now, this one, some might say, doesn't really belong in the basic blue category because it does have a bit of sheen and shades in an interesting color, etc. But I decided to put it in because to me, it really falls into sort of a basic blue category. So this is Monteverde Horizon Blue. And this is in another vintage Schaefer's, and this is in a Schaefer Legacy 2. We'll review this pen on a subsequent episode, but this is an interesting pen because this is one of the very last American-made Schaefer pens. And again, great color. When we get to showing on the Tomoe River, we'll see how that you definitely pick up some special effects there as well. Okay, next up is another very safe ink. So this is Mont Blanc Royal Blue. This is Mont Blanc's sort of standard blue ink. This is sort of the basic blue. Comes in, of course, the classic Mont Blanc shoe-shaped bottle. So what we have here is Mont Blanc Royal Blue. And this pen is a Mont Blanc .149. So we have the classic Mont Blanc blue ink in the classic Mont Blanc pen. But again, very sort of standard classic blue ink. Definitely leans more on the purpley side of blue for sure, but it is the standard Mont Blanc blue offering. Next up, we have an ink that I will give you a warning on. So this is Iroshizuku Konpeki, and I will warn you that I don't use Iroshizuku inks in any vintage pens with a sack, because I've had literally personally with my own eyes see it eat through a sack. Not the Konpeki, but a different Iroshizuku, but I'm just very gun shy about using Iroshizuku inks in any sort of sack-filled pen. So this is not a sack-filled pen, so I'm okay with it. So this is Iroshizuku Konpeki, and this pen is a Sailor Fude, and again, very, very, very pretty ink. This ink does some crazy stuff on Tomoe River paper, so we're going to see some interesting shading on there. But on the Rhodia paper, it just looks like a nice, pretty, sort of light shade of blue, but it's going to be quite different, you see, on the Rhodia paper. Okay, our very last ink comes all the way from Australia. This is Robert Auster Soda Pop Blue. Robert Auster makes a lot of great inks. There's several Robert Auster inks that I could have put in this category of generic blue inks, but this is the one I chose to do. So this is Robert Auster Soda Pop Blue. And this pen is a Ranga Giant 9B, and this has a fine nib. If you saw my review of this pen, you saw it with a broad nib. Ranga pens very often come with spare nibs, so this one came with a spare fine nib, so I decided to switch it out to see what it would be like. Nothing wrong. I love the broad nib. You'll see if you watch that video, I'm just falling over myself praising that broad nib, but I just wanted to see what it would be like with this fine nib. And again, fine nib writes great as well, so that, if, in case you're wondering how the pen transformed from a broad to a fine between the two videos, that would explain it. So that's all of these inks on Rhodia paper. Let's just take a quick look at how they would write on Tomoe River paper. Okay, going again in the same order, we have first up, let's just zoom in a bit. First up, we have Diamine China Blue. Okay. Next up is the other Diamine ink I have here today. This is Diamine Mediterranean. Blue. And some of these are going to look different on the Tomoe River paper, and some of them are not. So we'll go through that in a minute after we give this a little bit of time to dry. The next up is the Parker Quint Washable Blue. All right. Next up is the Waterman Serenity Blue. This again, this is laying down a particular particularly wet line, because this Lambic 2000 in medium is actually a pretty broad pen. The next up is also another broad pen. This is the Pilot Custom 823 with the Pilot Blue. And the next one up is the J. Herbin Eclat de Sapphire. And once again, apologize for butchering the French pronunciation for sure. And that pen lays a nice wet line down there for a pen that's relatively fine. And this is the Monteverde Horizon Blue. Okay, one thing you need to know about this ink. Back in the old days, there was an ink that Parker made called Pennmen. It was a line of inks. They had about 6 or 8 different colors, not a lot. The line of ink has since been discontinued, but kind of famous among that line of ink was the Pennmen Sapphire, which was a nice deep saturated blue that had a bit of red shading and sheen to it on certain papers. People say, and I can't vouch for that one way or the other because I've never actually used the Pennmen Sapphire, was that the Monteverde Horizon Blue is the closest thing on the market today to an ink that that matches that. So that is sort of the folklore, if you will, that's going on around on that one. So the next up is Mont Blanc Royal Blue. And this is a nice dark purpley kind of blue. Next up is the Iroshizuku Konpeki. And this one generally on Tomoe River paper does some interesting things, which we'll hopefully get to see. And very last but not least is the Robert Auster Soda Pop Blue. Now, let's take a closer look to see what kind of effects, if any, we get from some of these inks on this Rhodia paper. Okay, in terms of just sort of a flat blue ink, you can't go too much flatter than, say, the Diamine China Blue or the Parker Quint Washable Blue. Those inks are just very, very sort of flat, lighter colored blues, and you're not getting really much of any effects on those. There might be a microscopic amount of shading on the Parker ink, really no shading at all on the Diamine China Blue at all. Now, here's where it starts to get interesting. The Waterman Serenity Blue on the Tomoe River paper does get a tiny bit of very attractive reddish sheen to it, which looks really, really nice, and to a lot of people be probably unexpected. You also get some sheen on the Pilot Blue, albeit a very, very different shade of blue. So if you like the base on the Pilot Blue with some shading to it, there you go. Very, very nice indeed. You get, with the J. Herbin Eclat de Sapphire, you get a very, very nice shade of deeply saturated blue, but not much in the way of special effects. that red shading is definitely popping up on the Monteverde Horizon Blue. Whether it's the same way it did on the Parker Pennmen Sapphire, I can't say, but it is definitely there. The Mont Blanc Royal Blue is fairly flat. There might be a microscopic amount of shading if you really scrutinize it closely, but it is just a very, very nice dark, deep purple blue. The Iroshizuku Konpeki has little bits of red shading that pop in and out every once in a while, which is very, very nice and welcome. It is a lighter colored blue, so the red shading really, really looks pretty nice with that. And the Robert Auster Soda Pop Blue has some really nice color variation going with it as well. So again, very, very nice indeed with all of these. So you're definitely getting some definite effects on some of these, even though they're really just considered what's very often basic blue inks. One thing else that might be worth noting is that if you look at the back of this sheet, they were generally pretty well behaved in terms of bleed through, with one notable exception. The only one that really was penetrating was the Diamine Mediterranean Blue. The others really much minded their own business, so to speak, on the paper. Let's just do some quick jotting on this Field Notes notebook just to see how some of these inks behave on paper that's really not designed for fountain pens. I mean, I know I do use Field Notes notebooks. They do generally work okay with fountain pens. They're not the greatest. So again, if you want to see how the Field Notes notebooks work, we can just try that out real quick. So this is the Diamine China Blue. Next up is the other Diamine ink. So this is the Diamine Mediterranean Blue. I'm just going to do Med Blue. Next up is the Parker Quint Washable Blue. Next up is the Waterman Serenity Blue. And finally, not finally, but next is the Pilot Blue. So far, none of these are really feathering. They're all behaving pretty good. I'm guessing they'll mostly be okay. Next up is the J. Herbin Eclat de Saphir. Next is the Monteverde Horizon Blue. Next up is the Mont Blanc Royal Blue. Followed by the Iroshizuku Konpeki, and finally the Robert Auster soda pop blue. All right. They all seem to have done pretty well, and this works out well because I can get all of them in one shot on the camera here to see, so you can get sort of the totality of what we looked at. You get a good look at my really sloppy handwriting. So these are some basic blue inks. As you see, even what we call a basic blue, you still have quite a bit of color variation, etc. Personally, in terms of my favorites of this bunch, if I had to pick, I would definitely say, the Monteverde Horizon Blue definitely is up there among my favorites. Frankly, I like them all. There aren't any I dislike here, so let's just go with that. Monteverde Horizon Blue, the Waterman Serenity Blue, again, a really nice one that I happen to just like a lot personally. The Mont Blanc Royal Blue I like quite a bit. I think you could probably see a pattern here. I tend to like the more deeply saturated ones, but I'm going to throw you a curve here because this is going to be one of the lesser saturated ones. My next favorite would be the Iroshizuku Konpeki, because I just think it's just a pretty color. Again, warning on that one though. Again, I just don't use Iroshizuku inks in any kind of vintage sack-filled pens, etc. Use them in eyedropper pens, cartridge converter pens, etc. Pistons probably are fine too. Just keep them away from rubber sacks. I just had, I wish I'd saved a picture of it, but I had an Iroshizuku ink literally just eat a hole right through a vintage Schaefer touchdown that I'd spent quite a bit of time restoring myself, and I had to then do a good chunk of the restoration job all over again because of that. So I'm going to save you the trouble that I had. So anyway, I think that might be it for this video for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, please subscribe. If you have a comment, please leave one. Keep those thumbs up coming. And as always, have a great day. Bye-bye.